All right, so I wanted to do a short tutorial video here on growth and development as far as fetal development is concerned. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at our fetal development. So human development, we're going to begin this at the time of fertilization. So at the time that our ovum is fertilized by a sperm, that is where we have development beginning. Initially, you're going to have the prenatal period. All right, you're going to have infancy and adulthood afterwards. This is called the postnatal period. The prenatal period is everything from fertilization to birth. That is going to be the entire time that the fetus is developing within the mother. The postnatal period is everything after that until death, right? So we're going to have maturational processes and changes that are specific to the prenatal period and specific to the postnatal period. Commonly used terms that we find here, number one is going to be conceptus, right? So this is going to refer to the embryo and all of the embryonic membranes around it. This is all of the products of conception. So we've got all of the structures developing the zygote, all the embryonic and extra embryonic structures. So we include not only the embryo, but also the placenta within this. Next is the congenital malformations. This is any type of birth defect that we find. This can be genetic, this can be structural, this can be anything cognitive, functionally. This can even be metabolic. If we see thyroid deficiencies, if we see growth hormone issues, things like that. Next is the embryo. Embryo is going to be any developing human, all right? And it's going to go until, or sorry, after the second week of fertilization. So at fertilization, up until 2 weeks post-fertilization, we are a zygote. After that, we become an embryo. The embryonic period goes until about the 8th week, all right? At this time, we become a fetus. So we go from a zygote for the first 2 weeks to then an embryo. And then at the 8th week, we change that into a fetus. Now, as I was stating, from the 9th week on, during development, we have a fetus, right? So we have all the major developmental changes that are going to occur during the fetal period, right? We see all of the development of the organ systems and the development of processes, cognitive abilities, neural pathways for things like hearing and eyesight, everything like that. Morphogenesis, this is where we have a cascade, usually of interactions that result in the development of an organ or a body form. So, for instance, the morphogenesis of the cardiovascular system or the morphogenesis of the heart are the cascade of ordered events that happen to form the heart. A neonate is going to be the first postnatal period that we encounter, and that is going to be the definition of a newborn. So a neonate is going to be from the time of birth until about the end of the 4th week after birth. So the first month, roughly, of life. Organogenesis, again, this is going to be organogenesis, the creation of organs. This is going to be all the events established to establish an organ-to-organ system. Primordium, these are the first cells or tissues of an organ to develop. So this is basically your stem cells or your primordial cells, right? This is going to be where anything comes from. So the initial tube, such as the neurological tube, are the primordial stem cells for the central nervous system. A teratogen is going to refer to any sort of an agent that causes disease or malformation, especially in a developing embryo. We see that this is an environmental agent. It could be something as simple as nicotine or cigarette smoke that gets in there and causes an abnormality that can lead to a gross birth defect. It can be very detrimental to a fetus. We use the trimester system to analyze pregnancy. We go by three, right? The 3 trimesters, first trimester, second, and third, usually about 3 months, right? Because of the total of 9 months of pregnancy, we can differentiate that down into 3 months of periods of development. A zygote, again, a zygote is going to be that period where we have from the time of fertilization until about 2 weeks after fertilization. This is mainly at the cellular level. So we're going to have pretty much individual cells at this point. So looking at that development, right? So the timetable of development here, we see that at the time of fertilization, right, we're getting this mature oocyte or mature follicle. And at the time of ovulation, which is about halfway through the menstrual cycle, about day 14 of the cycle, we have ovulation take place. If there is a sperm that is present, that means that we are going to have fertilization. So at this day here, we're going to have fertilization, and then we begin zygote formation. So we have the zygote present here. By the third day after fertilization, it becomes what we know as a structure known as the morula. And the morula and the early blastocyst are going to end up being the structures that actually go down and implant into the wall of the uterus. So by the sixth day after fertilization, that zygote has gone all the way from the fallopian tube now and migrated to the wall of the uterus. And it embeds itself into endothelium, or the endothelial lining of the uterus. And we see that we have the placenta beginning to form on this side of the blastocyst. Then we get into 8 and 9 days out from fertilization. We have the amniotic cavity beginning to form. Now we are totally embedded inside of the endothelial lining of the uterus. By day 10, we have the blastocyst completely implanted. By day 12, we start to see the mesoderm of the extraembryonic tissue forming. And then by day 14, or 2 weeks after fertilization, now we start to see the embryonic disc and we have the embryo, right? So we start to see the dorsal aspect of the embryo here. So from day 1 of fertilization here until day 14 here, this is the zygotic period. These 14 days or these 2 weeks from fertilization to the dorsal aspect being visible are going to be the time of zygote. All right, after this, we see the embryonic stage beginning. At the embryonic stage, we see a bunch of activity happening here. See the intra-embryonic mesoderm beginning to form at day 17. By day 19, we have a neural fold beginning. We have the neural groove in there by day 21. By day 23, we start to see a primordia of an eye, okay? So this actual facial neural tube begins to start to form. So day 23, day 24, about 3.5 weeks in, the actual eye and ear begin to form. Around this same time, we see the formation of the heart begin, all right? Day 26, by this time, we see upper limb or upper appendage start to protrude. Okay, 27, we're going to start to see the upper and lower limbs start to bud out. Next, we see by day 31, there's a pretty visible developing eye right here. By day 33, we start to see hands at the edge of the limbs here, start to see a hand plate begin to form. Day 37, here, not only do we have a hand plate, but we also have a foot plate, right? And around this same time, we see the oral and nasal cavities begin to form. By day 40, the upper limbs are going to be bent at a pseudo elbow that we see. And we're also going to have digits begin to form here at day 41. We start to see the protrusions of the fingers. All right, and then we have the start to form the actual fetus itself. So by the time we get to the 8th week, which is going to be around this period here, day 56, 57, this is where we have the fetal stage, okay? So we stop the embryonic stage, day 56, 57, and we begin the fetal stage, all right? Then we have an actual structure of what looks like a human beginning to form here. As we can see earlier on, that neural center or head is going to be almost half of what the actual body is looking like. And from the front, we have almost like a Beavis and Butthead style formation that we're looking at as far as the fetus is concerned. But that will change as we move along. All right. we see by day 58, 59, we start to see genitalia forming. So at this point, usually you can start to visualize the gender of the baby around 58, 59. So that's going to be about 9 weeks of age. Then a couple more important things. Um, we start to see the development here. We see the urogenital fold. This is going to be a labioscrotal fold forming. Down here, we see the human face profile beginning at day 64 or so. And then we have a face that has a somewhat human appearance by day 66. All right, so here we go. This is putting it all together. This is the day of implantation, okay? Day of implantation in about the end of the first week into the second week. And at the end of the second week, we have the end of the zygotic period, beginning of the embryonic period. So third week through eighth week, we have the embryonic period. 9 weeks until full term, around 38, 39 weeks or so. This is the fetal period. So we see that the development of a lot of important structures really is almost complete by the time we get to the end of the embryonic stage. Basically, the heart and the upper limbs have formed, the lower limbs have formed. We really have more specialized things that are beginning to form after that. So during the fetal period, that's a big time for central nervous system and nervous processes. So fine-tuning things like the eyes, the teeth, we have the ear formation, genitalia, a lot of information sending out for formation there, and the central nervous system. So a lot of our growth structures, our physical scaffolding, the arms, the legs, the head, all of that, that is formed pretty early on. And then we get more of the fine tuning in there for the central nervous system, and then select processes of reproduction, especially towards the middle and late fetal period. All right, that was growth and development. Thank you all for joining me. I'll see you at the next video. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. Helps me out.